you decided to call your worst enemy brother or sister? What if the person that you dislike the most, you purposely, intently thought only good things for that person? Hi, I'm Sierra, and I'm joined by Rob and Amy, and we are Painted Porch Strategies. I'm glad to have you here as you join us on our journey for a handbook for new Stoics. And we are on week 34, care more about people and other beings. So in this week, they talk about how it's really natural to care the most for people that are the closest to us. So it's really natural to care the most about yourself because you're the closest to yourself. And then the people that are kind of on your inner circle. And then the farther on the outer circles you get, kind of the less care or the less warm and fuzzies you have. And then when you get to that outer ring of people that you really don't agree with or don't like, and it kind of becomes the opposite of care. You dislike them or you feel disconnected from them. And what they're trying to get us to do is to try out a practice that's a Buddhist technique called Metta meditation, which is where you're actually trying to care more for strangers and people that you do not like than you care for yourself and the people closest to your inner circle. So as we talk more about this, I would like to first get your initial thoughts as you read about this whole idea of caring more of people that are farthest away from you or that you dislike.
You want me to go first? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So for me, I think this is a fascinating challenge, and I think it's one that is perfectly timed for, I'll say this day and age, but let's be honest, this stuff is 2,000 plus years old, so they were struggling with dealing with difficult people as well on a daily basis. But I do love this, that the initial reaction is when you think about your circles, think of that outermost circle as almost your innermost circle, and trying to kind of flip it around on its head and wish those who you either don't think about at all or think about adversely with love and goodwill.
It's an awkward exercise because it's counter to what we're kind of taught from early on, isn't that, okay, the family unit is the unit, the friends unit is the unit. You don't often think about people you don't like in endearing terms. Mm-hmm. But that's why this is such an interesting challenge, because it forces you to be uncomfortable, which that's where growth happens. And the idea is really to treat everybody equally, to not wish ill upon anyone, no matter who that person is. Wish that they find happiness, wish that they find enlightenment, whatever it is that you want to wish upon them. That's why this was so cool, because it takes the idea of the view from above, which we've talked about too, another Stoic teaching, and putting all people on the same team, like all humans are on the same team, so to speak.
Yes.
Well, the Stoics have a concept for this called Oikos. And am I saying that right, Amy? Amy's our Greek
expert.
Right.
Sounds right. I'm going to say yes.
So
Oikeios.
Yes.
Oikos. That sounds.
The root of this is oikos, which is also is a Greek yogurt. But oikos has to do with in Greek is kind of familial. So oikos has to do with your house, your family, and the people that surround it. But they say it's hard to translate it because really oikos has to do with the idea that everyone is a part of your house. And not only everyone, but they also stretch it to go to every being. So this would include animals. This would include plants. I mean, you could really get really PETA with this concept. The idea that not only is your oikos your actual family that lives in your house, but if you kind of look at everyone as a brother and sister. And they give us kind of two methods that they want us to try out in this. So they give us the option number one, let me just make sure, is behavioral. So Heracles talks about this. He has this really cool little loopy thing right here. Oh, there we go. And it has to do with you are kind of at the smallest circle, and then all these circles radiate out. So in this sense, people who you perceive as distant from you or someone you care about, you want to make this calling those people names of a family, like calling them brother, sister, or cousin. And what this does is it takes somebody who might feel distant to you, disparate from you, and bringing them in close. So by simply calling them by a close name, you are starting to bring them into your heart space, into something that is more dear. And they say, consider that when you say that, you treat them as such. So you call somebody brother or sister or cousin, and then you proceed to make your behavior reflect how you would treat that person that you love. The second option is meditative. And this is where it really gets into the meta meditation. So actually, this reminded me a lot of something in Rob's Master Your Message course that he talks about. So they have you think about somebody who is close to you that you love and imagine the sensations. So you could think about your husband, and you could think about how good you feel and how calm you feel in that person's presence. And then maintain that same sensation, that same feeling when you think about people that are farther from you, and think about them with that same warmth, with that same love, and apply that to your thinking as a way of bringing them in closer. Perhaps maybe to understand that person better, or to be more accepting and loving.
Mm-hmm. And I love that with the meditative one specifically, they're very practical people, both the writers of this book as well as Stoics, where they say, you know what, if you think about channel that good feeling, that warmth for someone that is close to you that you care about, and then try to maintain that and expand it out to someone or something that you don't necessarily think about. But if you can't, if it goes away, that's okay. Instead, if that does happen, still wish that person well silently. So instead of, if you're struggling to keep that warm sensation when you think about someone who you would otherwise consider your enemy, if it immediately drops from your heart to your belly, that's okay. Just pause, but still wish them well and say, I wish them love on their path. I wish them joy on their path. I hope that they find happiness, whatever it might be. So I do appreciate that they're like, listen, the reality is you're not always going to keep that sensation. That's the goal over time. And that's what this meditation is meant to do. But if you can't, simply just pause and wish them well.
So which one of these two did you guys vibe with?
Yeah.
Did you pick one over the other?
What did you, or if you can share a little bit about how you used it, or which one you chose, the behavioral or the meditative?
So for me, I'll go with the behavioral part, because I have difficulty when it comes to people in power and they abuse their power, in my opinion. That is where I struggle the most to offer them goodwill, because it seems to me that they're using their power for either their own gains or not using it with restraint. So for me to wish those people well, it's more of I hope they end up doing the right thing for the most amount of people with that power.
I would challenge you though and say, are you still though adding a layer of judgment to that?
100%.
Because you have your idea of what the right thing is.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the struggle of being a human being, is you have different views on all kinds of different things. You have to accept that not everybody has the same views that you do, even if those are in power or not. But that's my challenge, is how do I just let that judgment go? But that's what this whole exercise is all about, is it's so ingrained in me that it's going to take a little while to get to that point.
Okay. So is it something where to lean more on maybe the meditative angle, where you're simply just wishing them that they find peace, or that they find a state of contentment. So in your mind, they're not trying to, mastermind their way through.
Well, and I might be giving them too much credit, because they might just be going about their business on a daily basis, doing what they think is right, and that's the end of it. Whereas, I'm like, I've watched too many movies or something where I'm thinking they're like pulling strings in the background, like
the nefarious.
Yeah, because I do I do think that there's some kind of grand master plan sometimes. And then you look at things and maybe there isn't. Maybe people just reacting like we are, trying to figure out the best way to go about, whether it's because of this pandemic or whether it's because of power transitions between presidential candidates or trying to get a minimum wage passed, all these different things. Maybe it's not quite this man at the top doing this, like you said.
Mr. Burns.
Yeah, Mr. Burns. Maybe it's just, people just trying to do what they do and what it is. So it's trying to let go of the idea that I put on them or my thought on their strategy, because that might not be correct. And this is part of it too, is understanding that as you go out towards the end of the circle, towards all moral patience, you think that, everybody has different beliefs and different systems and different upbringings that arrives at a certain point, like the now. So all you can do is try to say, okay, hopefully you don't harm anybody else. Hopefully you're content, to go back to your point. And that's what you got to try to wish for, I guess.
Well, and that's where the practice of calling them brother or sister is intended to try to help with that. Because if you were to say brother or sister, if you witnessed or heard about your brother doing something that maybe you didn't agree with, you would still give him a little bit of leeway there, a little bit of slack, because you're like, well, maybe he just hasn't figured it out yet, or, well, maybe he just didn't have all the information, or this is just a step on his journey. And so that's the whole point of this, is that the closer they are to the center, to the core circle, you're a lot more forgiving of things that you might otherwise judge a lot more harsh in those that you're observing from afar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's key is, and now Amy and I are both only children, but like, for instance, Rob has a brother. So your brother you love. Now, does that mean you always agree with your brother? No. Does that mean you and your brother never fight? No. But you have a love and a closeness of understanding of him. So I think that actually they've carefully chosen brother and sister, because that doesn't mean that they are just like you. It just means that they are close to you in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think about it too is I remind myself that we as human beings all come from the same place. Like, that's literally been proven. Africa is the home base of human beings. So that's where everybody came from, and then we spread out. So if you think about, at some point, we're all related, literally in a familial sense. It's just however many thousands of degrees of separation at this point. But if you go back to the very base of it, we all come from somewhere. We all come from the same place. So regardless of whether you're male, female, or however you want to identify, or whether you are different at skin tones, none of that really matters, because we're still all the same. And I don't even know what the number is. It's 99.3% of our DNA is in common, and it's some ridiculously low amount that's different. Yet we focus on that part often in the world, instead of just going, okay, we all come from the same place.
Right.
Yes. It's that greater oikos.
Yep, exactly.
So Amy, what did you use? How did you apply this in your life this week?
So I mainly focused on the behavioral, not so much the meditative. However, I had a couple ahas that came through this, and I noted that when it comes to the circles and, how you interpret or treat other people based on where they are in your circle, I actually noted there's a bit of a dichotomy there, and it really teeters back and forth depending on the circumstance. What I said is, if somebody does something wrong, I actually give others further out in my circle more grace, because I don't know them as well as the people that are closer to me. The people that are closer to me, I actually don't give them as much slack, because I know who they are and how they behave. And it's more of the, well, they should have known better, because I know. Whereas if it's good, I weigh it less than those that I do know. So if it's a good act, people that are further out in my circle, I don't give them as much kudos or credit as I would people that are closer in my circle. So I realized that I was like, oh, I actually give a lot more slack when things go wrong to people I don't know, because I don't know their situation. Whereas the people I do know and how they behave, I'm like, no, you shouldn't have done that. You know better. So that was really interesting that I came across with that. And as far as the brother or sister thing, I didn't really gravitate to that as much. And it might be because of the fact, as you mentioned, that we are only children. So I don't have that word doesn't connect with me as much. But what I did use is the word teammate. Because I see, for those outside of my known circles, because ultimately we're all on the same team called humanity, and we are all on the same team as Earth. And we each are struggling and thriving
Team Earth
with variations of the same thing. Even thinking about, as Rob mentioned, with the biology, biologically, it's a very, very small variation of us. Even skin color is an evolutionary thing. It's not a distinction of a different type of people. It's just people who lived in a certain environment, their skin got darker, or people who lived in a certain environment, their skin got lighter. So that's really, once you understand that we're all mostly the same. There might be a tiny, tiny difference, both either visually or behaviorally. We're ultimately all part of that same race of human.
Team Earth.
Well, one of my favorite parts of this week is at the end of each chapter, they tell us why we're doing this. So the why do it this week is couplefold. One is that when you're a little kinder, it helps you get used to the habit of being kinder. And when you're kinder to people, you're kinder to them. It makes you a better person on the outside. But the bigger piece of this is there's scientific research that shows that meditation, or this idea of keeping that warm feeling in your heart, even when you don't feel as connected with that person or their ideas, increases positive emotions, compassion, and mindfulness. You could make the jump and say that this helps slow the release of stress hormones, reduces the heart rate, all which we know are better for our bodies. And when our bodies are happier and our immune systems are stronger, we don't get sick as easily, we perform better, we think better, we problem solve, and we feel better. So why are we doing this? One is to be a better person, live a more virtuous life, be kinder to people around us, both close circles and far circles, and to be happier. Win-win.
Yeah, exactly. And to add to that, they also talk about how it's been shown to reduce intergroup bias, because it's no longer an us versus them, it's a we. And you're all operating, regardless of the circle, everyone is within that we. They talk about, I've been reading a book recently where they talk about this as a concept, and I think they even mention it, the same guy, Peter Singer, he's a modern day philosopher, but they talk about when it comes to, let's say, social revolutions or changes that want to happen. And, whatever that movement might be, the way that you can get people to embrace your movement is you have to draw your circle bigger. You can't make your circle smaller and then be mad when people aren't in your circle. If you really want to create change, you make that circle wider. You just draw a wider circle. So you're including them in as opposed to excluding them out.
Right. Although in the days right now of COVID, you have to draw them closer, but 6 feet apart.
Yes. Virtual circles.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But again, I've told you this. I know this sounds crazy, but I think this is actually an opportunity. Although we can't physically be closer together, I think this is going to get us to think about how we can be closer together in other ways. And one of those ways is in the mind. So if you're able to embrace people, not embrace physically, but embrace in your mind that Team Earth, that loving kindness, and knowing that for the most part, virtuous beings all want the same thing. And then it can allow you to operate from a place of love instead of from a place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all we have time for this week. I know we could keep on yapping on the porch. We love to talk philosophy and talking this, but I've got to have a sign off for now. If you're enjoying this, I invite you to follow us on our group where we are doing a handbook for new Stoics. Next week, we will be on week 35, question every action. So join us for that. If you want to know more about what we do on the porch, believe it or not, we do other stuff besides just talk on Zoom. We have some great programs. We have a radical mindfulness program. We've got Master Your Message program. And then we've got a new upcoming program that I want you to stay tuned for. So if you haven't already, join us on www.paintedporchstrategies.com. And we'll see you soon on the porch.